Stranger.
Hello, and nothing like a bit of shameless self-promotion to start the session. Got a ton of stuff to get through, so hello and welcome to Kit by Basics and Simple Video Techniques. A bunch of stuff we need to hammer through this, so notepads at the ready. Watch this on replay afterwards, grab the QR code, that's going to give you all the contact information. Any questions, ping them me afterwards on the social media channels, etc, etc, etc. Anyway, let us crack on. Here are, before we crack on, my beautiful, lovely clients who I wish well over the coming months and who've been very good and very fun to work with over the past however many years. So let's start by talking about what you're going to need. Unfortunately, at some point in this, you're going to need to splash the cash. It's a necessary evil. Don't have to spend a ton of money, but you will have to spend some money. Now, there is no right or wrong kit. I've just noticed, there we go, I'm in the corner. Delightful. There is no right or wrong kit. You have to decide what you think you're going to need and what you actually need, of course. Thinking and wanting are very different things, and as in photography and video, there are many, many beautiful things that you can want, but you don't necessarily need them all. However, I would always say buy once and buy well. And when you buy, I would also consider scalability, and will your kit grow with you? Will you be able to, as your skills develop and as your career progresses, will you be able to add on to the kit? And don't go rebuying it all because you realise you need something or whatever. So it's worth considering, always maybe just looking ahead a little bit, not massively, but enough to, to have it scalable. And of course, on saying that, to do all this, you actually don't need tons of kit. And the mistake that we all make, and guilty, and many photographers are guilty of it too, is that they will go out and spunk a load of money on photography gear and video gear, which isn't always the best option. With video, I have narrowed it down to some to three things. You need to support it. You need a tripod. And as most of you know, apologies if you know this already, a stills tripod probably won't cut it because the stills head is locked, whereas the video tripod head is movable and it's got fluid in it to make it smooth shots. We'll talk about that more shortly. You need to light it. And again, you don't need to spend a ton of money. There are some amazing lights out there and amazing lighting kits for relatively competitive prices. And of course, you need to hear it. as you are doing right now, my dulcet tones. So let's jump back a little bit, and we're going to look and talk about sticks and heads, tripods and tripod heads. Video tripod heads are not the same as still tripods, as I've just discussed, because, well, video tripods need to move. When you're buying a tripod head, I would get a head that can take 10% more weight than the kit that you've got right now, maybe even 20% more weight. You need a little bit of headroom. Don't buy a tripod. If your kit is 5 kilos with a big lens and whatever you've got on top, don't buy a tripod that can take 5 kilos. Get one that can take 10 or whatever, or that's not more double, or 8 kilos, something like that. So you want to look at that. When you're looking at tripod heads, there's one popping above my head. Counterbalance is good, and a counterbalance is basically exactly what it says on the tin, that if you're pushing down, it gives it a balance, so it doesn't just kind of go like that. You've got not only the fluidity, but you've got a little bit of tension, and also it's like a springiness, so you're pushing against the resistance. But the tripod, when you're setting it, you should always sort of set it level with everything loosened off, and it should in theory stay there, and you only adjust the tension depending on how much friction you want to pan or tilt. So there's a very, very quick intro to tripods. I said this was going to be fast and furious. So here's what we need to talk about. Lighting up the world. At some point, you will need lighting, as you will probably have discovered when you're shooting stills. If you are doing stuff at night, you can't always rely on natural light, no matter how good the camera's shooting. In darkness, you probably will need lighting, because you would want to also get some creative effect going with your lighting. And now, as I'm sure you all know, LED is very common, it's very popular, and it gives a great quality of light. So we would use in the old days, and to a point still do today, use hot lights, and they're great. They give a lovely quality, but they are hot. They take an hour to cool down, so you can't pack them away, and all this is stuff that you don't want to be messing around with when you're on a little shoot. Get the lights out, shoot, pack them away. And of course the lights, they can be powered by batteries for several hours, some of them, and they're very transportable, and you can take them in a sort of flight case, and set of 3 light heads do well. And some lights you can use for stills too. Get rid of me so you can read the text. Some have a strobe function where you can connect them to triggers and they flash a little bit brighter, and they can get you out of a pickle. They're not always as good as strobes, obviously. I'm not suggesting they are, but they can be quite versatile nowadays. And like I just mentioned, they can be portable, you can run off batteries, you can use modifiers with them, Bowens and Elinchrom, etc, etc. And ones that are increasingly popular and extremely priced extremely well, a range of lights. The range of lights from a company called Aperture. They do some phenomenal lights, and they're LEDs, and they do lots of modifiers. You can use Bowens and all sorts of different modifiers with them. The other company, which I have a lot of fun with, is a company called LumeCube, and they do some beautiful little lights which are essentially cubes, very small cubes, and you might have seen these advertised on the social media channels. They're magnetic, they get modifiers, you can stick on diffusers, you can put them on the camera, they're waterproof, they're controlled with an app. They're not going to light up a football stadium, etc., but they're really good for even for sort of doing a vlogging and that type of thing, or putting some gels on. And if you wanted to, I've used them in fridges before, in ovens. I've used them in drawers. When you open the drawer, you can have a glow because you can use the yellow filter. Extremely versatile, and you can even buy small a travel tripod and use them, or a very small lighting stand, and you can use them for documentary lighting too at a pinch. And they're very cool, and they come in a little case, and you can build up the set, and they're very, very reasonably priced. And at the moment, I'm using a set of lights, a company called Light and Motion, and I'm using them here in my makeshift, what was my lockdown studio. I'm using them here. These have got an inbuilt battery. Again, they can use all my Elinchrom strobe attachments. So I've got my my Octabox and my strip light, and I've got a small Octa dish thing on the one here, and they've got a ton of modifiers available, and they're great, and they can last a good couple of hours if you're not throwing out full power, but they they're crazy bright, and they're LED, and they are actually weather resistant too. So that is pretty good. And a set of 3 of those is going to be more expensive than the Lume Cubes, or maybe even the Aperture ones, but it's a buy once, buy well. These will last a very long time if you take care of them. And actually, even if you kind of subject them to a few falls and stuff and knocks, they'll still be absolutely fine, and they're very good lights, as all the others that I've mentioned. Let's move on and look at audio. Now, audio is an extremely important part of the filmmaking process. It is often shunted to one side when we're going out and buying kit, because we think it's really important to spend the money. You spend, several grand on the camera, and another maybe a couple of grand on the lens, and maybe another lens, and a bit of this and a bit of that. And actually, obviously, if you don't ever need to record audio, then you don't need mics, but you will always need some sort of basic microphone in your bag of tricks, and I would recommend investing in some decent audio kit from the get-go, because it's just really critical. So we're going to look at a few different types of mics. Now, the most common one, which most of us have seen or already have, is a top mic. These are pretty standard issue in most kit bags. They are not going to be phenomenal at recording in every situation, excuse me, but if you are fairly close to the camera, like a meter away, and you're in front of it and you want to do a little piece to camera, or there's someone who's talking, they're gonna be okay. And they are much better than the built-in mic on the cameras, which are essentially small pinpricks in the camera with a little tiny microphone behind it. So anything is better than those. And they're convenient, of course, because you can mount them on the camera. Some have batteries that give you powered, some don't. There's a whole range of them now. This is the MK400, I think, and Sennheiser have just launched the 200, which is about 90 quid. And you can leave that pretty much in your camera bag, in your pocket, and just leave it on the camera pretty much the whole time. And infinitely better audio than the little dots on top of the thing. The downside, as I mentioned, is they're not great in noisy locations, and ideally you really have to keep the subject close to the microphone. And of course, that's the rule really with most audio. You want the source of the sound to be as close to the microphone as possible. The next sort of level up from that, if you like, or in addition to the little top mic which you would have in your bag, is a radio set, a radio mic, or a lavalier as it's known, lavalier being the tight or tight clip mic as most people know it. And the radio mic consists of a transmitter, what the mic plugs into, and a receiver which goes onto your camera, or indeed into a sound desk. But for simplicity, it would plug straight into your camera, and this then gives you the opportunity to wander around. And of course, it's great for interviews, and you can move away from the camera. However, as with all microphones, mounting it as near as possible to the source of the sound is still going to be a great idea. The downside of these is that they are omnidirectional, which means that the sound is going to be picked up from pretty much a circular area from around the top of the microphone, and it's not great for groups, of course, because if you're trying to record more than one person at a time, ideally they would have a microphone each. So if you are recording groups, what you might find is you need to look at a shotgun microphone, and I'm using one here. It's above me, and I'm hoping that it's not picking up much sound from behind it. Now, the reason a shotgun microphone is so good is because it does exactly that. It will pick up the pattern is sort of like that from the front of it, and not much from behind. So if you're in a noisy room, you put the noise behind you and you shoot away from the noise. And it's very good at picking out distinct voices. So you can have 2 or 3 people together, and that's why you've probably seen them when it's mounted on the pole. It becomes a boom mic, and the sound engineer can move it to where the source of or twist it to the source of the sound. Now, they are, of course, great for interviews because they are very directional. And if you do mount it on the pole, the downside is, of course, you're going to need someone to hold your pole for nah. And with all mics, as I've said, it's always best if you are close to the source of the sound. So the closer you are to someone's mouth if they're talking, generally that's the best sound you're going to get. Of course, you don't want the mic to be in shots, which is why they often hang it over the top of people on the boom pole, over the top, and that kind of thing. All right, that's audio, very briefly covered. Let's look now at shooting formats, which groan, techie talk. I'm not a big fan of techie talk, but just having a basic knowledge of this will give you actually a little bit of an edge when it comes to making your decisions when you shoot, and also help you in the edit as well. If, like me, many of you shoot and edit, you would want to pay attention, class. So here you go. Let's look at this. This is what I call punching in. And it's not as violent as it sounds, but we're going to have a quick flick back in time to the good old days of standard definition, which is our lovely four little 720 by 576, whatever it was, TV in the corner of the lounge, all SD and not particularly great quality. And then we have the advent of high definition HD, 1920, 720, etc., etc. And you can see already that the size of HD is more than 4 times bigger than the size of SD. So all these boxes I've got on the screen here, they're all to scale. And the advent of 4K, which we're now very familiar with, that came in, and you can see, looking at the diagram, that it's about 4 times bigger than HD, which is obviously a lot bigger than SD. Now, lots of manufacturers, lots of camera companies are touting the latest and greatest, and you can see them all here at the virtual show. And 8K, you can see there, if I get rid of me, is obviously a lot bigger than 4K and oogles bigger than HD. That's a technical term, oogles bigger. Now, shooting higher quality than you need can help you in the edit. It can also help future-proof your footage. So let's have a look at how it can help you in the edit and also in your storytelling. And here's my nice section called a load of crop. I was going to a load of old crop, but I thought that's a bit too crass. And here we have a photo, well, it's actually a still frame of a 4K video shot. And there's the 4K shot. It's the bloke playing his guitar on the side in the streets in Paris. In the good old days when we could go to Paris and have a little holiday, a weekend break, or even work. So let's drop into that image a lovely HD size frame. So that is a 1920 by 1080 block, and you're looking at a 3000 something by 2000 thing frame behind it. Don't worry about the technicalities. Suffice it to say, you can see that that block is about a quarter of the size of the 4K frame, and we can move it around. Now, what am I moving? Obviously, not literally moving the block around, but we're moving almost the crop of the image. So, like in stills, you can crop in a photo that's larger. If we're working in a high definition timeline on your edit suite, now it doesn't matter whether you're using Final Cut or Premiere or LumaFusion, anything at all. When you drop a 4K video into an HD timeline, the edit software will squash it in, so it will put the whole 4K frame inside. However, if you tell the software to not to fit it in, it will then kind of stay at its native size, but it'll be oversized within the HD thing. Now that means you can do what I've just done, and you can essentially pan the image around to get the shot. So what I would eventually do is I would settle on a shot of the bloke and a mid shot like that. So that would be the frame. It's just his head and singing to the microphone and a bit of his left shoulder there. And that means I now have 2 shots from one camera. And because I've shot in 4K and edited in an HD timeline, it enables me then to have more flexibility with shooting. Now, of course, if you're shooting in 8K and editing in 4K, you have the same amount of play. If you're shooting in 8K and editing in HD, you've got an absolute squillions load of space to muck around. I mean, it's probably a bit excessive, but you would have huge amounts of space to play, so you could get several different angles from one frame, which is great. So let's look now as the time ticks down. We've done audio, we've done a little bit about formats and why I would recommend shooting in 4K even if you're editing in HD. And for the record, most, if not all of my clients are still more than happy with HD. Do not think that you have to shoot in 4K because everyone wants it. They don't. I'm just suggesting these tips and techniques because actually it'll just benefit you in terms of what you can offer, and you can get double the amount of shots from one take essentially. So shooting tips, and I've spoken about this before in my other sessions in years gone by at the show, but it's kind of critical to learn a bit of the basic grammar of how to tell stories. And the most important one that I would suggest learning is what's called crossing the line. Now, if you can see here, we've got a person on the left and a person on the right. We have a horizontal line drawn across the middle of them. Now, along that horizontal line, that's the end. That's the line that you must not cross. However, if you're then drawing a protractor-like 180-degree arch from underneath them, anywhere on that dotted line is generally okay to put a camera or two or three or more. So if you position the camera at the other side of the line, that is where it is. And you can see there, if I remove myself from the shot, you can see I've dropped in, it could be 3 cameras, it could be 1 camera that you move the position of. And that is the best way to visualize how not to cross the line. Now, you can include in your shots a crossing shot to show a change of view. So that camera there you can see in the middle, the one that's between the two, that could, for example, be a wide shot. And that would be shooting the whole scene. So, well, a wide shot. So both people, as you can see them, probably, so you can see there if they were standing face to face, get then each back and maybe a bit of the environment. Now that helps the viewer obviously build the image. It helps them build the scene, set the scene. They know the placement. They know where people are within the room, within wherever they are within the venue. And then what you can then do is you can move a camera, or you can add a camera, and you can shoot up there, pointing at person on the right. The camera that I've now revealed behind me, that's pointing at the person at the left, and you can chop between those cameras, or you can use the same camera and just move it, of course, and redo the take. But what you would need to do is ideally go to a shot between it. So you wouldn't go from a shot of each, big close-up of each person's face to another close-up of the next person. I would always cut to a wide shot and then maybe go to a mid shot, and then in that same way you're using the edit to show the flow of conversation, and you're not sort of expecting the viewer to try and figure it out. That what you don't want to do is make it difficult for them. Now, there are times you break the rule, but that's more of an advanced sort of filmmaking technique, because you break the rule, it makes the audience, you want to confuse them because it's a particular method or storytelling you're doing. But for the basics of filmmaking, and certainly for interviews, it don't cross the line. And my mantra has always been, you can use this to get different shots of the same scene. So you can do a zoom, you can zoom in, you can do a wide shot, you can do a close-up shot. But what you always need to do is remember that you mustn't cross the line. And the best way of thinking about this is if you are watching a football game, and the football game is usually played, with the cameras on one side of the pitch, and the camera's shooting that way, and the game is, let's say your team is shooting from left to right, whatever sport it is, football, rugby, and the game shoot left to right, and the cameras always go that way along the pitch, and then they pan back, and then they go that way, and then they might cut down on the pitch to a steady cam of the corner being taken. But what they never do, or during the gameplay, is flick to a camera that is literally the opposite side of the ground, because that would confuse you, because then your team would be going, hang on, we're going the other direction. And in fact, because it's confusing, a lot of TV companies will label that when they do that. Let's say they're examining a goal, they will enable it as a reverse angle. And it comes up on the screen, reverse angle, because they need the viewer to understand that where the direction of where the cameras are. Now, the modern tech has given them the rise to these sort of ability to kind of pan around the play. But if you notice, they always tend to start on one side and then shift round to the other side. So the viewer is taken there. You can't just let them, most viewers, you can't expect them to understand the new position of the camera, and it confuses them, because in your brain it's like person on the left is on the left, person on the right is on the right, and if you jump to the other side, those positions swap round. So it's worth bearing in mind. And what are other tips we got here? So it's also a lot easier to get it right in camera. Now, I know you can have all fancy raw video stuff now, which will eat up a huge amount of storage, and it's quite an advanced way of shooting. But for most people, including me at the moment, I tend not to shoot raw video. It's not as like a raw photograph. It's much easier, and it will save you a lot more headache if you get it right in camera. And unfortunately, no matter what the camera companies will tell you, a lot of the time, manual focus is usually the best. If you're doing some specialist shots and tracking on a gimbal, maybe you can use autofocus. If you look at the very high-end cinema lenses, they're always pretty much manual focus. And the rules are, steady the camera. That's the first thing. And we've already spoken about getting the tripod. So steady the camera, get the shot, check the audio. Then you want to look at the white balance, which you obviously do with stills. Again, but with stills, it's easier to correct. So with video, just get it right. Make sure that the white is white, and you know you're looking at the scene, and everything looks on the viewfinder as it should. And lock the balance and make the exposure. And my mantra for this is compose, focus, then shoot. And once you've done those, compose, focus, and shoot, you then use wide shots to establish, then mid shots, and then you go to a close-up. And you don't have to shoot everything at a very wide open aperture. It isn't effective always to shoot at f2.8. If you're shooting a conference, you need to shoot at 1.4 or 2.8. It doesn't have to be cinematic. You can shoot it at at 5.6 or f8 or f11, because what the client wants is to see the person on the podium. They don't need to necessarily have artistic bokeh in the background, etc., etc. And we then move on to adding things onto your camera. So what about a cage? Now, you might have seen these. These are metal cages that sit around the cameras, and they are used to bolt on various accessories. I have one on one of my cameras. I don't always need it on, but I leave it on for ease of use. I can add a handle on the top, a side, I can mount it, I can mount arms, and the one I'm using in my studio here, I've got a monitor attached to it and all that kind of stuff. However, modern cameras are pretty good at stabilized handheld stabilization. I've got a couple of cameras. I've got an S1 and S1H, Lumix, and the in-body stabilization is stunning. So a lot of the time, you don't actually need to rig it up to the nines, because it's more stuff to carry around. It's more stuff to get in the way of getting the shot. And with all of this, it's very important to remember that someone with a more expensive kit can still, can still do it badly. That doesn't mean because they've got loads and loads of expensive gear, they're going to shoot some amazing shots. Might sound obvious, but actually you'd be surprised how many people go and spend a ton of money and think they're going to get amazing shots. And we're going to quickly look at now, what about gimbals? We see them all the time. It's become the thing. Lots of stuff shot on gimbal. You might have seen people walking around an event with one. They're relatively cheap. There's a range to go on. There's a ton of them out there. They all generally do the same thing. They keep the camera stable. They are not the golden ticket to giving you amazing shots. They are very good ways to tell a story, and they're good ways to create interest and movement. But please don't use it on every shot on slow-mo just because you've got them. It's like if you have a drone, you don't have to shoot every shot from 400 feet in the air. They're used to tell a story. You can use them in a creative way to add to what you're already making. And when you are shooting, of course, what's important to remember is you're going to need backups. And especially if you're shooting at high resolutions, 4K, 8K, you want to start thinking about backing your footage up. And a couple of devices which are very popular and very good. There's the Narbox, which is a self-contained unit with built-in Wi-Fi. It can connect to your phone, your iPad. I'm a big fan of this for mobile workflow. So if you're shooting on your phone, you can offload it. If you're shooting on your camera, there's a memory card slot in there, so it offloads and you can edit. In LumaFusion, for example, you can pull the stuff straight in. And also with that, there's the Nexto D, the MPS 10, and I've got one of these too because I'm spoilt. But I've put a SSD drive into that. It's got a little screen. You can throw loads of cards in, and like the Gnarbox, it verifies and checks. So you can back up as you go, and then when you get back to your studio or edit suite, all your footage is on there. And if you have to, and you're on a shoot and your memory card space is being very precious, you can safely pretty much delete what you've got, because, excuse me, those two devices will do the same sort of thing and verify and check and make sure that the footage isn't all knackered. And like I said before, I'm really blazing through this now, but just because you have the kit doesn't mean you have to use it on every single shoot. And my mantra, again, lots of mantras today, but I would say that the most important thing when you're doing this at any level is to keep it simple. Because overcomplicating something, especially if you're not 100% confident with the kit you're using, can really make things a heck of a lot worse than doing a simple shot. So there's no harm, there's nothing to be embarrassed about in locking the camera off on a tripod, shooting the shot and then moving it and doing another shot. You don't have to go in with all guns blazing using every piece of kit you've got, because 9 times out of 10 it will take longer because you're not competent with it. You're probably trying to overcomplicate something which could be quite simple. So keep it simple, certainly when you're starting out, is always a great way of looking at things. Now, just before I go, I want to kind of introduce you to my lovely QR code, and I'll move myself from the picture-in-picture there. So thank you, stay safe, of course. But now, if you are interested in learning more, this is the shameless self-promotion that I've been promised I'm allowed to use at the end of my talk. There's the QR code, scan that, and that will take you to my site with all the links and my coupon code. And we can arrange various training sessions, one-to-ones, social distance sessions, COVID-friendly sessions. We can tailor them as to what you want to learn, pre-production, post-production. We can do editing, mobile workflows, all that kind of really delicious stuff. And that coupon code will give you 20% off. So we can have an hour or so and you can pick up some new skills. Either way, drop me an email with any questions and I will always get back. I'm always up for it on Twitter, so to speak. And that's it, really. And in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me in my little corner of the Photo Show 2020. I do hope to see you all in actual real person life at next year's show. Please God, we all stay healthy, stay safe, keep your distance, wash your hands, wear a mask, enjoy the rest of what the show's got to offer. Fire any questions you like at me offline whenever you feel comfortable. And in the meantime, look after yourselves and each other. And in the style of Jerry Springer, I'll bid you a very fond farewell and take care.